We're good. All right, well, welcome everybody to Monday, October 9th, our board meeting, our regular board meeting. Mr. Bertram, would you call roll, please?
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Here.
Mrs. Stewart?
Here.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Here.
And Dr. Urso?
I am here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So move.
Any questions, comments? There are none to Mr. Bertram.
Did we get a second?
Second.
Yeah, we did.
May I
No.
ask who it was?
Belatedly, I did it.
Kathy, thank you. Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Sorry. Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes. All right, it looks, do we have a presentation this evening? All right, so, okay, I see it. Oh, yeah, it's on here. And so, looks like there's no public participation this evening, so moving on to presentation, it is our superintendent, Ms. Hauser. I'll turn it over to you, and our treasurer, Mr. Bertram.
So we're going to start out tonight. So this evening, we'd like to share some updates with you on House Bill 187 and then universal vouchers in the state of Ohio. We're going to start off with Mr. Bertram over here to talk about House Bill 187 and some of the tax legislation that we're seeing at this point in time.
And I'd like to start out by saying that action is actually moving in Columbus with House Bill 187 and Senate Bill 153. They've been having meetings through today. We even heard there possibly could be a vote today, but I haven't heard of that happening for House Bill 187 at this point. And one other thing I'm going to add, because I watched the video after I finished this presentation that just came to me at about 4:30 this evening. The County Auditors Association of Ohio is also suggesting proposals for possible changes within House Bill 187 and Senate Bill 153. Don't know if they'll go or not, but I'll kind of inject them a little bit into this as we move forward. What will House Bill 187 and companion Bill Senate Bill 153 create? They'll create limits to growth of inflation within the property valuations that we see every 3 years. I mentioned before, every 6 years we have a sextennial, which actually does a full hard appraisal on everybody's property within a jurisdiction. And then on those off years, every 3, but happens every 6 years, there's what's known as an update. And an update is a paper appraisal based on sales more than anything that happen on those cycles. So every 3 years, we're seeing modifications to our valuations, either in that update or that reappraisal. This past year was a reappraisal year. And the reappraisals generally when we see the highest growth. Updates are a little more conservative, but traditionally reappraisals. And that is what's happened. We knew over the last 3 years there have been very high increases in property valuations. Supply and demand more than anything has caused that. And a very low interest rate that started 3 years ago, still was good up to about a year ago before the Fed started raising interest rates. Those two combinations have caused inflation, a lot of inflation to personal property, mostly residential and agriculture properties. And in the county, we were looking at a 43% increase overall for Butler County. County auditor has submitted a lot of data to the Department of Taxation in Ohio. It ended up with a 37% increase overall in Butler County. Middletown City Schools were sitting at a 40% increase, just as certified currently in Ohio. Because of these things, legislators in Columbus said, that inflation could take people out of their homes. Kind of the same thing that happened in the 70s when they ended up putting House Bill 920 into place to find ways to control the inflation of property valuations. They're looking to do something as well for this cycle And unfortunately, happens to be the time that we're seeing our reappraisal. So here comes House Bill 197 and Senate Bill 153. And I will tell you, House Bill 187 is sponsored one of two legislators, Thomas Hall being our legislator. Senate Bill 153 by two senators. One of those senators is George Lang, our senator. So they definitely see an issue here in Butler County and surrounding areas. So what those will do is they will limit growth on inflation, and we'll talk a little more what that means. We could look at they could look at lowering the 20 mil floor. Actually, the County Auditors Association, that's their proposal that our legislators could consider. They're looking at possible 3-year valuation averaging rather than just taking that 40% that they see in property valuations. Let's look back 3 years, average that out. So it's going to be something less than 40%. And I could tell you, we're probably looking at 26, 27% for Middletown City Schools on that averaging compared to 40%. And then they're also looking at who will have the authority in tax equalization processes. Currently, the Department of Taxation is the authority. They ultimately tell the county auditors. County auditors submit what they believe that those increases should be, or decreases for that matter. We saw those in past. And then the state will either certify it or they'll kick it back and say, no, we don't agree, look at it again. And that happened 3 times in Butler County where it bounced back and forth. If you have any questions, stop me. And I know, Verlena, a lot of this is real new to you. And okay, limiting the growth of inflation. What does that mean? This is proposed amendment to limit the growth to districts that are at the 20 mil floor. Out of 610 districts, approximately 392 districts are at the 20 mil floor. The 20 mil floor is a strategy that many school districts have used since House Bill 920 came into play in the mid-70s. So this has been happening for 50 years. It's one of the tools that we had to decide how our district's going to be funded. You get to a 20 mil floor, that's the lowest it can go by the Constitution in Ohio. You can't go below a 20 mil floor. And anytime we'd see increases, it'd be at that 20 mil floor. So we'd see increases, a 40% increase. We not only would see it on inside millage, and we currently have 3.02 inside mills. We'll see the full valuation there, but we'll also see it on outside mills. Outside mills is everything that you vote on through the years. Inside millage is determined by the county auditor. Every county entity gets something from inside millage. Anything they have on the outside, anything that's been voted. Okay. Currently, I had just under. It's just over half of the districts at the 20 mil floor. And there's another 50 to 60 districts, if their full evaluation goes in over the next 3 years, depending the cycle they're on for reappraisals, about a third of each district alternate every 3 years. So it doesn't happen statewide for every district every year. We'll probably be at 450 districts out of the 600. 3/4 of them, they'll be at the 20 mil floor.
It used to be half, and now it's 75%?
Yeah. Yeah, if nothing changes. House Bill 187, Senate Bill 183 don't make changes to slow that down. Okay?
In dollars and cents, what does this mean? Like,
It's coming.
I'll jump on that. Your little head. By limiting or impeding these districts creates uniformity to Ohio school districts and uniformity, I should say, to school districts, and will raise constitutional concerns related to the proposed amendment. So if legislators say, okay, instead of a 20 mil floor, we want to lower you to an 18 mil floor, that takes a constitutional amendment to get that done. That's something they can't fix like that because that's written in our Constitution. So some of the changes that they have proposed are going to end up getting, if they become law, will be challenged. It's something I want you to be aware of. All right, lowering the 20 mil floor. Again, discussions are taking place up in our State House to take a look at this. Is one of the options. County auditors, that's one of the options they're looking at. Let's lower that 20 mil floor. To give you an idea, because we stop at the 20 mil floor, we still have an effective millage Because when values go up, to get to a 20 mil floor, if you started at 25, values went up, they would lower your millage until you get to 20. So a 40% increase wouldn't be a 40% increase for any district above that 20 mil floor unless it took them to or below that 20 mil floor. They change your effective millage. I know it's kind of complicated to think about this, but what happens with those districts, the 392, that's where our legislators are concerned. Why are so many districts at the 20 mil floor? Because it is an extremely high year for valuations. I wouldn't say unprecedented. This has happened before, but it hasn't become the issue it is this time. So going back to that 20 mil floor, we're at 17.9 mils effective millage, outside millage. So even if they lowered us to a 18 mil, we're still below that floor. If that's the only thing they changed, we would still see the full increase of the 40%. Now, that doesn't mean property taxes were going up by 40%. That's where Ohio math and tax law really is tricky. What it would mean, and I'll share that right now, Chris, 40% to us, if it goes up by 40%, being at the 20 mil floor, you take half of that 40%, call it 20. Now, pretend it's 20%. Your tax bill for every $1,000 you pay would go up by 20% or $200. So if you're currently paying $4,000 a year in taxes, you'd see an $800 increase. Okay, 20% of the $4,000 is an additional $800. So for every $1,000 that you pay in taxes now, you're going to see about a $200 increase. So it is
A
substantial.
mill is worth $200 of taxes.
Pardon me?
A mill is worth $200 of taxes, is what you're saying.
No,
No.
it doesn't quite work that way. A mill in our district is worth $800,000, but
Of total income.
ask the
From that
question.
section of the ticket. Well, there's what's below the floor.
What
and above it.
happens, yeah, you can't put an exact dollar amount on it because the inside millage is calculated differently than the outside millage. The inside millage is calculated at the full rate of taxes. The full rate is what has been voted in over the years. So if you're voted in at 40%, you're going to see that calculated on our 3.2 mils. But then everything else is calculated at the 20 mil floor.
I see, okay.
Yeah, so there is a little difference. It's hard to put a exact dollar on
Yeah.
an amount like that.
Okay.
Generally, we say every mill will create $35 in additional taxes for a $100,000
Okay.
property owner.
Okay.
That's the rule of thumb there. The big thing, if we drop to the 20 mil floor, lower that 20 mil floor, this change would have an immediate detrimental impact on a district's finances, forcing some districts into financial stress immediately. Because I'll give you a good example on ours, and you'll see it coming up. I have forecasted a 27% increase this year in taxes, in valuation increases. Comes in 40, my forecast is fine because it's going to be above and beyond what I did. But if they make any changes, change it to something less than 27%, then what we've been planning on could have a negative impact on us because we'll receive less revenues than what I had forecasted because of that. Okay, some districts, if they're right at that 20 mil floor, then all of a sudden they say we're going to drop it to 18, they'd see hardship immediately because they're not much below that 20 mil floor. So they would lose, they'd now be above the floor, their millage would drop back down with the higher valuations that still may keep them above the floor. So they may see no tax increase when they were planning on a larger tax increase being at the 20 mil floor. Because that effective rate's going to bring their millage down, and they may not see any additional revenue.
So the 20 mils is calculated using both the inside and outside?
No.
Just
Well, yes, you put them all together, the
Together.
inside plus the outside,
Plus
yes.
the outside.
Thank you.
and then you will always receive the effective rate, but
Yes.
you may not receive any additional taxes.
That's correct.
Based on the floor.
Right.
That's correct. So
Right.
if you're at the 20 mil floor, you'll see the full value increase of anything, any increases in triennial and reappraisal years. If you're above that floor, they're going to lower your millage. So in essence, you're not going to get any additional revenue until you get to that 20 mil floor.
I get it.
So it's not inflationary if you're above the floor.
Right. If the-
If you're at the floor, any valuation increases is inflationary to your taxpayers. Yeah. And that's why so many districts have moved the 20 mil floor, because every 3 years, we know historically, we're going to see an increase in revenue because home values go up over time. And that's been the idea without having to run levies over and over and over again. Hamilton hasn't run a levy in 30 years. They've been at the 20 mil floor for 30 years because they've been able to live off the increases just through appreciation in home values.
So it primarily just affects those districts that are at the 20 mil.
Well, the changes they're trying to make, yes. But they could make some changes that could affect everybody as well. But right now, we're not seeing that that's likely to occur. It could, but not as likely.
So the Middletown district may forego any increase that at least you forecasted.
We'll see an increase, but it could be very small compared to the 27% that I projected, okay? And this talks about what seems to be popular right now for Senate Bill 153 and House Bill 187. They're favoring the 3-year sales averaging. And by the way, both these bills are scheduled to sunset in 3 years after every county has gone through their reappraisal or update.
We get to go through this again in 3 years?
Well, hopefully they'll put committees together, find a solution that'll prevent this from happening again. But in 3 years, if nothing changes, we're going to be in the same boat we are today, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So the 3-year averaging and doing it would reduce our reappraisal increase of 40% on Class 1 properties, which is residential and agriculture, to about 27%. And this is, just dropping it that 13%, that's about a 32% decrease overall from what we were certified at by the Department of
That's
Taxation.
a decrease calculated.
13% divided by the 40 is a 32% decrease. So 13 of 39 is a 33% decrease. Yeah.
So the millage decreases, when the price of the house goes up,
Mm-hmm.
then the effective, they're still only supposed to get the same amount of money that they voted on in the first place.
If you're above
Right.
that floor.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
So
once you're-
lowering the floor puts more people above the floor.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So those that were planning on an increase may not see an increase. And if they do, it might be just a small amount to
Uh-huh.
get them to the new floor, if it's enough of an increase to get them to the new floor.
Okay.
But that's going to take, a constitutional change for that to happen.
What were you, you did not agree with somebody, it was written up in the paper that you acquiesced to a couple of proposals, or the other people did, but you didn't. What was that? Is that all this stuff?
That was on the county auditor's proposal that we forego millage for 1 year. And and I've got that information up here, a little bit of it.
You mean you don't count the millage?
They were
Before-
saying that I get a resolution for board members to say, okay, cut
Oh.
this millage, we don't need it, we don't
Oh,
want it.
oh.
And they were asking us to cut $5.7 million this next year in revenue when we're only going to gain $2 million from the state.
Oh. What's wrong with that picture?
Yeah, and I'll show you why that didn't work. And they didn't do the math. They didn't have conversations with districts to see how that would affect us.
It's nice to see it in real numbers, isn't it?
And yeah, and they didn't understand school funding, and that's the problem. Anytime.
Well, nobody understands it.
Well, you're right. Every time I learn it, they change it as soon as I do. So that's what I always joke about. And again, the 3-year valuation, even though I think it's what they may land on, and out of the 3 scenarios, it's probably the best option for us if they make a change. The best option is to make no change. Again, it's going to create hardships on districts who use this information for forecasting and planning purposes. The authority in the tax equalization process, it was brought up in House Bill 187 to give the counties the final say on what they think their taxes, their valuations should be increased. Now, ironically, the 27% that may be averaged out over the 3 years, the county actually, I think the last proposal they gave the Department of Taxation was a 32% increase. So it's fairly close to that 27%. But the Department of Taxation said, nope, it's a 40% for Middletown. This is what you have to use. And then ironically, the state legislators didn't like that answer. But what will happen is if they go to each county having the final say on what theirs are. By the way, there is an appeal process for the state tax commissioner, but they would have to appeal each state or each district of each county in the state anytime they were questioning valuation, so it's not very fluid for them. But again, it will lead to inconsistency and unpredictable results county by county. And the example I give you there is when I was down in Hamilton County, the auditor there, who's been there a long time, Dusty Rhodes, when he came in and said our value, you know, your house should be valued at $500,000, he would tax value it at $500,000. Very few, maybe two to a handful in the state of Ohio actually value at 100% of what the assessment says it should be. Most auditors have it anywhere between 90 and 95% of the valuations. They have the preference, but at least the auditor, the state commissioner has to look it over and still approve it. Now, if it went to each county deciding it, it becomes very political is the problem. It's not an unbiased, non-political opinion making those decisions.
Butler County's 2/3?
Butler County, he's usually around 92%.
Oh, 92.
Yeah. He's on the lower end of what I've seen, yeah. Now, that has consequences too, where we're saying, hey, we're at the 20 mil floor. If you raise that up to the 100% level that Dusty Rhodes did when I was at Northwest School, we saw a higher increase in the amount of collections for our district. When you only set 92%, that lowers our collections. But at least I know historically when I'm doing a 5-year forecast, I have a good idea what county auditors do, and I can adjust for that within the forecast. So it's not sprung on at the last minute. A great question. And yeah, with county auditors, that's the biggest thing I see. It could be done on a political bias rather than a business bias. Yeah.
So, Mr. Bertram, so among these proposals that you've listed, what's the district's position as you go to advocate tomorrow? What's the, among those proposals, which will you be arguing for or against?
That's a great question. Now, remember the county auditor's position, I just saw what it's going to do today and got some statistics behind it. County auditor, absolutely not. More districts are going to need more levies very quick. And what they're suggesting is that we lower the millage, the outside millage or the effective millage, based on the CPI of the latest CPI. Last year was 7.1%, the Consumer Price Index. So they're saying, okay, that's the cap for districts at the floor. Has nothing to do with districts above the floor. Some could have blended caps. If they're close to the floor, then all of a sudden their 40% puts them at the floor, and then he has a blended rate of 7.1 once they meet that floor. So somebody could drop a couple mils below the floor, but it's only affecting the districts that are at or very near the floor. So again, it's not consistent throughout Ohio from district to district. It is consistent for those that would be at that 20 mil floor. But the problem with their plan is it doesn't lower that 40% increase in the values of our homes. So that 40%, rather than lowering that to 7.1, that 40% goes to the state of Ohio, the Ohio School Funding Plan, thinks we're much richer now. We lose tax dollars because of that. So not only are we losing local dollars, Now we're losing our state share of tax dollars. So it's got a double whammy, the way that that is set up now. And I'll show you a report here to show how the new fair funding formula will affect us if we get our 40% increase. And boy, it's eye-opening. Really is. Did that answer your question? Yeah,
Not exactly.
I'm still getting
Okay.
there, but
Yeah.
I'm somewhere if we
It's okay.
have to do
It's all right.
anything.
I just think that there's a great deal of tension in the community right now
There
over this very
is.
issue. I mean,
There
you can't
is.
have your cake and eat it too. I mean, when we're talking about valuations, I know my personal home right now, anyone can go online, look up the valuations.
Yep.
You know, when I look at
public.
$85,000 increase in valuation, you know, that makes me a little nervous. So, you know, I'm just curious where, you know, what reasonable approach can we solve if there is a solution here. The funding formula is putting us into quite a mess. It's going to be difficult to find a solution.
And to answer your question, our position, Debbie and my position, has been just to make sure our legislators don't do too much too fast, because a lot of other things are going to break in the process. Trying to do something, let's do one fix. Let's see what that does. We've got 3 years to get back and see how can we get it for the next round of triennial updates or reappraisals.
Right.
Let's not put in 1, 2, 3 items and just watch things crackle. Because districts that weren't planning on going out for a levy for 2 or 3 years may be on the ballot in the fall or in the spring. I mean, if they do too much too fast. And in this economy, that's not going to help the school districts either. So there does have to be a balance.
Right.
I appreciate that. As you can see, what percentage increase did your district forecast based on the reappraisal? I forecasted a 27.7% in May. Actual is 40%. This was a BASA survey that Debbie sent to me last week and gave me about 2 hours to complete it. Actually, they gave us 24 hours. I got it done right away. In dollars and as a percent of our annual budget, how would a 5% increase or cap affect your budget compared to an increase in what I projected? Now, this is kind of in line with the county auditor. Now it's making sense to me because I didn't know where this 5% came up when Debbie sent it to me, but now I know that's what the county auditors are proposing, a CPI indexing. In fiscal year 24, we'll lose $2 million. If it were a 5% cap. Fiscal year 25, 3.7, same in fiscal year 26. Fiscal year 27, 3.4 million. Over the 4-year total, almost $13 million we'd lose in revenue. That's a drastic change for school districts. I know we're just one example. It'll affect every district differently. So that's my kind of my message to our legislators. Don't do too much too fast. Let's figure this out. What was the percentage increase for your district in the 3 prior reappraisals and updates? In 2017, we had a 7.6. 2020, we had a 23.72. And like I said, there had been high numbers before, and then this year we're looking at 40, so we averaged 23.77 over the last 6 years in updates and reappraisals. 2 reappraisals, 1 update. So that 40 is high, and I will tell you, when you think about this 40%, that's the accumulation of 3 years of increases from the pandemic to today. And houses started really inflating. This 2020 is actually before the pandemic. And we had a 23.72. And if we would have had, an example here, in the last 3 years ago, if our valuations, this is just an example I got off the PowerPoint I watched this evening, went up 15%. Then 2 years ago, it went up 20%. And then this year, it jumped to 42%. The 3-year average of that is a 26%. That's kind of what our legislators are looking at. Taking those 3 years, what are the sales each of those years, take the average of those 3-year sales increases. Okay, and we're going to be right around 27%, not the 40%. But what I caution, and I caution legislators, is right now, we're not seeing any slowing of the housing market, other than the sales of the market. But the supply is still so low, values are still going up. They haven't reversed themselves because those that have to buy or need to buy are buying. And they're paying up for those homes. So if we're 13% below our 40%, they do 27%. And then we still see, call it a 5% each of the next 3 years. There's 15 plus the current 13. We're still going to be 27% behind the market in 3 years when we have another update. So again, the problem, what we're suggesting, or what our legislators are suggesting, is a fix for now. It's not a fix in the long run, because we go back to regular Ohio law. After these bills sunset in 3 years, we'd already be close to 30% below market value. So again, we'd have the same issue in 3 years as we do today, unless there is a hard reversal on valuations. But in Ohio, we're not seeing that. There are some big cities seeing it, but it's more because of their commercial property than it is their residential property. People aren't going back to work in offices to simply explain that. So those markets are falling. Okay, I know I'm talking a lot, saying a lot, but I think you need to hear it the best I can explain it, which is difficult. This may be hard for you to see. I don't have my handy dandy pointer. Let's see if I can. Is my mouse on it? There it is.
Yep, it's up
yeah,
there.
right here. With a 40% increase, in 2024, we'll see a $792,000 increase, okay? And just in property tax receipts, what we're going to collect. About 1.5 in 25, 26, and then it bumps up to 1.8 and $2 million in 27, 28. $7.5 million we'll collect over a 5-year period. That's a lot of money. But I mentioned the Ohio school funding formula. Every time we see an increase in valuations, in the eyes of the state, we become richer. Therefore, our state aid goes down. You come down this line right here, 2025, our state aid goes down by $370,000, $937,000, $1.7 million, almost $2 million. It goes down nearly $5 million over the same time period. We only generate an additional $2.5 million in revenue with that large 40% increase that we're seeing in 1 year. Because in the eyes of the state, we can afford more because our homes are worth more, even though our residents may not be making a dime more than they are today. But in their eyes, we should have more taxes locally supporting our schools than we should have state dollars supporting our schools. It's a bait and switch, right? And when you get up and you look at year 27, 28, where we're getting an additional 1.7 in revenue, we're losing 1.7 in state aid. Additional 2 million, almost 2 million we're giving up in state aid. So it's almost dollar for dollar in 3 years because of our valuation increases versus what the state says we should be getting. Now, the thing that I like to point out, and I look at it from an economic point of view, what the state, and the state created this, we didn't. We just, they give us the rules, we play by the rules they give us. We have the toolbox that they've created through laws, where our taxpayers will be paying $7.5 million, but the state now will be paying us $5 million less. For every 3 additional dollars, Todd, that you'll pay in taxes, 2 will go to the state of Ohio, only 1 will stay local.
Are they trying to get rid of the state income tax?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the strategy. And local taxes will have to bear more of the pain if we don't have state income contributing. Yeah. But they haven't used that argument unless I'm in person with the legislator. I can put that one in writing. So I think that's important for people to realize. What the state created, they're benefiting from. And that's why I tell them, you got to be careful on how we clean this up, how we try to fix these high increases, because we could, to me, This kind of looks broken a little bit. Why, even though we're not really going to be a richer community, our houses are selling for more. It doesn't mean we can afford more at the local level, but the way fair funding is, that's how it's set up.
So if you went back to that first slide, that uniformity word still keeps bothering me.
Yeah.
It seems like this is just decimating Ohio's responsibility for schools, period. No matter what they say. There's no uniformity in how this is going to impact us.
There's no perfect system. I will say that defensively for the state of Ohio. I think the fair funding formula is a step forward from the unconstitutional formulas we've had for many years. Nobody's challenged this one, so it tells me that most people are very happy with it. Vouchers are being challenged, but not the school funding formula, because we said how much it costs to fund a student. But again, we're still at the mercy of the state, because each year they can decide on how they want to set that state funding levels based on prior year's data. And remember we talked about the forecast where they were still using FY18 data, even though costs have gone way up. That benefited the state, but ultimately they ended up using fiscal year 22. That benefited us. They did the right thing. But the state always has control on making those decisions every 2 years with the biennium budget.
So essentially, they're just shifting the funding to a local source and away from the state, kind of what they did a few years ago in higher education, where they shifted the state subsidies for state institutions.
And local governments as well. They've been hit hard.
So poor
yeah.
communities are still going to have poor schools.
Yeah, and wealthier communities will be able to vote in tax levies to
Right.
supplement the funds.
My argument, Todd, very loud and clear, right or wrong, I think Ohio's creating two levels of education, the haves and the have-nots, and Debbie will talk about the vouchers. I think
Absolutely.
that started it. I'm not going to say that this will finish that by any means. It's still a better level. We were making a lot more money off the fair funding, but as I have to remind legislators, because I look at it, look how much more you're getting, Randy. We were underfunded, for those of you that have been around, the four of you, by $14.4 million for a decade or more. We were capped below the state formula by $14 million. Now we're starting to gain that back in fair funding, but now because of the shift that we could see down at the state aid totals down there, the state's going to end up taking it back, but we'll still be better off than we were. So fair funding is better for
So
the district.
the bottom line is Ohio does not want to, the state of Ohio does not want to fund education. They want the local communities to fund education.
They're
Public education.
well, careful how you say education, because Debbie will show you where they are funding other educational facilities at a much higher level than they're funding our public schools.
Public education.
Yeah.
Public education is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And well, that's a whole nother thing, but how do you evaluate? The state of Ohio is going to have to spend money to evaluate the schools that are getting the vouchers the same way they evaluate, that's an unequal system as it is.
Yeah, and that's our argument. As public educators, that's our biggest argument. It's not the same playing level by any means, but, and I'll
No,
let
I'm
Debbie
trying to-
give
Yeah,
her
I was going to say,
trying to
that's
understand-
coming.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
understand all this, but then it makes, the things that I read are the discrepancies between who's going to get what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's tough. I mean, every kid deserves a great education. Every
Absolutely.
kid. One shouldn't be substandard from the next. And are we seeing a shift in that equalization? So, but people have different opinions on it, and I respect that too. But I advocate for our public school. I always advocate hard, even though, Todd, I'm also a taxpayer, and I can see that side too, definitely.
We're ready?
If they're ready,
Okay.
I'll rest.
I need you to wiggle your heads a little bit after all that, because now we're going to talk more numbers, right? So if you could put aside what, all the numbers that Randy just shared, that is mind-boggling. and really want to center you in on vouchers and what's going on right now when it comes to vouchers. And when I say right now, it is going on right this very second with vouchers. So before we go into the new universal vouchers, which really we saw that, or last year we heard of vouchers, the expansion vouchers. Just want to remind you of the standard Ed Choice voucher. Just if you recall, that was standard Ed Choice voucher. Students in schools that are considered low performing and met that 200% of the federal poverty level qualified for this Ed Choice standard vouchers, right? Okay, so now we've seen, last year we saw come in the state of Ohio. Now we're one of 7 states in the United States that offers universal vouchers, which is where we are right now. So universal vouchers hit last year. And just want to share some information with you. So these are a little bit different, right? Universal vouchers now are for anyone, right? The income criteria is 450% of the federal poverty level. And what that equates to for a family of 4 is $135,000. Okay, this doesn't apply to schools that, on a certain list. This is universal. So if you take a step back to the Ed Choice, the standard voucher, that family was making $60,000 to qualify. Okay, so now we still have the standard voucher, and now we have the universal voucher that's coming into play. Okay, and that's for any universal. So 70% of Ohio families qualify for the universal voucher. So that's something really to tuck in the back of your mind. So not only, so you don't necessarily have to hit the 450 federal poverty level number. Anyone can apply. So if you have a family of 4 and you have higher than $135,000 yearly income, you can still apply for the universal voucher, but you're just going to be funded on a sliding scale. Okay? So the new voucher amounts right now, in the past we were looking at about $5,500. Right now we're looking at $6,165 for our K-8 students, and then $8,407 for our high school students. But that's not the actual cost for the vouchers. Right now, total funding for your K-8 voucher is more like $7,500 and some change. And your high school, 9 through 12, is $9,800 and some change for high school vouchers. And I'm going to share this with you in the weekly update, so you'll have all of these numbers. But the biggest thing really, if you want to jot this number down, on an average, Middletown City Schools receives $5,800 for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. So you can already see the discrepancy there. So we receive $5,800 per student, and you can see the voucher dollars. So, that's almost close to $2,000 difference, and
So
a little
Debbie,
bit
does
more
that-
for high school. Go ahead. Was that you,
So
Verlena?
does that mean that 5,800, that's what we're getting per student for the district?
Correct.
But if they choose to go to another school, we're paying out these new amounts? So we're paying out more than what we're actually,
Well, the state will pay the dollars. It used to be under the old voucher system, the dollars would filter through the district and we'd pay, but it no longer works that way. The state pays the dollars
but that's
But-
money coming that
from
would-
us, correct?
That
Would have
gone to
been
public.
coming to.
Right, it would have been
Middletown
coming
City.
to us.
And I will, if I can add that.
Sure.
I should just jump in without asking. The 6165 you see there, I think when I started working here 8 years ago, that amount was $4,600. So that's an increase of 64.5% in 8 years, that K-8 voucher has gone up by the state of Ohio. They've increased it
And
by
is
that
there-
amount 8 years. So 8% a year, basically, they're
Is,
seeing increases.
is there any reason given for this difference?
Not at this point in time. There's an anticipated lawsuit, November 2024, that's going to hit, that's going to address this point, the differential of the funding for students.
When it was voted in, there was, I don't understand where the argument came from.
That's the question on everyone's mind.
It was part of the the bargaining to approve fair funding. Legislators, I didn't like it, but liked fair funding. It was a give and take between
Yeah.
our legislators. So that kind of got thrown in to get the fair funding passed too. Yeah.
Our
So-
budget
so-
is about 72 million a year.
Oh.
Is it?
Oh, no, it's,
mu-
they're
in the
talking B,
billions.
they're talking B, not M, billions now.
No, I'm talking about our district.
Oh, we're
yeah.
going to get to that. I
Okay,
have the
well,
numbers for
of
that.
the 72 million that our district, it costs us, what percent of that comes from the state?
We're probably, we're close to 50%
50-50?
now. Yeah. Yeah, but again, if that 40% goes into play, that 5,800 is going to go down.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really, the takeaway from this slide is the inequity when it comes to funding, right? So you can see, just look at the total at the bottom. 7,500 K-8, and then 9,800 for high school, and then Middletown City Schools receives 5,800 across the board.
And
Okay.
when this started, when we were paying the 4,600, I think we were receiving, I don't know, close to $5,000. And I had one of our senators, I won't name him, but he says, why don't you let all your kids go on a voucher because you make money. We take less from you than you receive per kid, because they used to be on our count. And, that was never my point of a voucher. My point was fairness of a voucher, play by the same rules and pick and choose. We do get kids each year that start with a voucher, and the parochial school may not be able to handle the kid as quite like they thought they could. Kid
And then
comes
they come back.
We don't have that option. We can't send a kid. You go there, we'll give you the voucher. No, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
So the difference between, say, the 61, 65 and the probably 10 or 12,000 that it costs, that's from private money?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, let me do that. Okay. So where we are right now when it comes to universal vouchers in the state of Ohio. In 2022, the state of Ohio saw 24,320 applications that were approved by EdChoice expansion. But as of last week, there are 33 applications that have been submitted. DEW is, if you recall, the ODE has
new
dissolved,
structure.
right? DEW is Department of Education and Workforce.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that, you're going to start to see that now. So that's a 223% increase.
So that big bump from 24,320 to 78,633 is because of the universal?
Yes. And then, so what they're saying is they're seeing approximately 1,000 applications per day. And as of, in October 15th is the deadline, so that's coming up this week. Okay. And then also they're saying, private schools are accepting vouchers. Students must report tuition rates to DEW on an annual basis. Okay, so that just sort of gives you an idea of where the vouchers are going in the state of Ohio. And Randy's right, they're talking that it's going to be costing the state in the billions and not the millions.
How do parents know that they're accepting applications right now and the deadline's October 15th?
Well, I know that private schools are advertising,
So private schools don't
or adver-
advertise to poor people.
So I know they're advertising. Yeah, the vouchers, they're advertising for the vouchers. I just know myself, when I went to church the Sunday right after this was all approved, it was part of the sermon. They were talking in the sermon about this is what's happened in the state of Ohio. This is exactly how you would get a voucher. In the bulletin for that Sunday, they gave families the directions on how to do it.
Is there any compilation of district by district, how this is going? I mean, we know how many applications there are in Middletown. Do
Well,
we have any comparative data?
Well, that's a good segue. Keep pushing it. So I have that's was reported on the state report card this year. Okay, so but before I show you the numbers, I had mentioned that the voucher lawsuit is anticipated to hit November of 2024. And the big sticking pieces, the inequity of funding, also the transparency of the private schools, and also accountability. Right, so the state schools are held to, well, the state report card, we have various compliance reports that we have to complete. So private schools at this point in time aren't required to do any of that, the state testing, the compliance reports. So really, it's the platform of, if you're going to receive the dollars, that there needs to be some accountability and transparency of what's going on.
You know, one thing I found out when it hit the papers that the students who went to a private school on the test, they did worse than their counterparts who in the public school.
It could be,
But-
but at this point in time, we don't have any scores from the private schools to actually tell how they're
Well, they
performing.
got
You said
that info-
private scores do not have, they're not subject to the testing?
No.
No, they're not. But the kids the voucher kids who go to a private school have to take the test, and then they
The schools
compare.
themselves are not evaluated at
No,
all.
no.
Well, the schools are all lumped together, is what I found out.
The schools are lumped. At this point in time, the private schools do not have to take the same state tests that we have to take
So how
for
do the kids have to
accountability.
take it if the schools don't?
They
do not?
have to take it.
It's,
So they-
it's all changed, and at this point in time, they're not taking the state tests. So that's what the lawsuit's about, to make sure every child is held, every school's held accountable that receives the funding,
Right.
Except private schools.
even the private schools, but the private schools don't right now. So in the long run, if you're receiving the state money, you should be taking the test. Everybody should be held accountable,
The
and we
kids-
should have a
Aren't
benchmark
there-
of assessments.
Either the non-voucher kids take the test.
Aren't there,
That's up for discussion,
like,
Kathy.
other tests that you can, like substitute tests, that you can submit those scores, but then that's not the same as the state test? I mean, you can't.
The argument is if the private schools are going to receive state dollars, that they should be held accountable the same way
In the
public
same
schools
way,
are. In the
yes.
same
The
way.
question I've always asked legislators is, at what point does that private school become public?
Public,
When they
yeah.
have 25% of vouchers, 50% of vouchers, 75% of vouchers? Of course, their answer is never.
But that doesn't, the vouchers don't cover everything, because as we
No.
saw in one slide, there's so much of the tuition that's from private, the parents or
That's
other
true,
private
but when they're
organizations.
receiving more per pupil above average than what public schools are getting, there's the inconsistency.
Right.
And that slide showed that they get more per pupil than we get, and we're a high poverty district.
The last time I remember that schools had to take the test no matter what was it called? The ninth grade?
Proficiency test.
Yeah, all the schools had to take those in ninth grade.
Not anymore. Todd, did you have a question?
I do. Thinking about the impact of the voucher in the last 2 years, what's the increase, not percentage, just an increase in numbers in terms of the students that were on a voucher program or have taken advantage of the program in the last couple years? I know at one time the number was probably somewhere less than 200 students. Where are we now in terms of numbers?
So this is what was reported on the state report card that was just released. So let me also mention a piece to tracking voucher students now. In the past, when the money flowed through the district, we were able to run a report to see who was taking advantage of the vouchers.
What we're saying, though, is out of roughly 5,500 students, there's what, 118? Is that what we're looking at here?
If you add them
It's
all
all three of
up.
those numbers?
I can't, my
Okay.
eyesight's so bad, I can't
like
barely
So
read
let
it.
me, let me tell you, it is, so we have 556 students.
So is that-
represented up
How
there.
far is that, how
That's about
significant that?
8.5–9% of our
So it's not
population.
incredibly significant at this point for our district.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that's about,
Yeah,
what?
we have no way of verifying
Fine,
these
right.
numbers either.
But I mean,
That's what the
we're
state's
we're
saying.
talking about, the sky is going to fall if anyone enrolls in vouchers.
Yeah.
And that's not where we're at in Middletown as a
No.
district.
Go ahead.
No. But what you can see, they're broken out into who's using the Ed Choice scholarships, Ed Choice expansion, which is universal, and then you can see the autism scholarships. So we do have in Middletown, the city of Middletown, about 550 students that are using the vouchers.
and that's 550 students at least times that $6,000 some dollars, so that's about could be close to $500,000 a year that we're losing because these students are going somewhere else.
So if you add that up, let's just,
Even that low number, that 6,000 or whatever for K through 8.
you're looking at about 3.5 million.
3.5 million.
Yeah.
The only reason I bring this up is when we think about, I've said this before, within the Middletown community, the Catholic community is very supportive of education and has always been supportive of public education in this community. And I guess for me, I just don't want the message to be that it's us versus them. You know, community has to be able to decide what's best for their children. If it happens to be Middletown Public Schools, then that's the case. And if it happens to be where you have a choice, then I believe that's what you do. But I just don't want to send the message to those who do support the increases that they pay, and to others that, you know, that there is one message coming out of Middletown City Schools. I understand the numbers, and I understand how to put the math together. I'm just saying that I've listened to this debate within this board and with Mr. Stiles, and oftentimes I felt hostility. I'm not saying that's the case tonight, but I just think that's the wrong message to send to our community. That's just my opinion.
So I don't think that's really the message that we're sending. It's really just being
Yeah, I don't think that is the
informed.
case
No,
tonight. I do
because
not.
I'm with you, Mr. Moore. It's, you know, families have choices, but this is what we have going on, you know, at this point in time.
I noticed that, and this is the first time I realized that there's an autism scholarship or John Peterson special needs. Within the vouchers, are you familiar with the parameters for students who have special education requirements and how they apply? I know capacity at private schools is different than public schools. I know the cost for a district like ours for special education has continually increased. And so not all students, if we're talking money, are equal in regards to their cost. Is there any kind of information locally or regionally or statewide in regards to that? Is there proportionality in regards to the number of students applying who have an IEP or a 504 or some type of special accommodation, and are they accepted within those kinds of environments, or are those the students who are not accepted in those environments based upon their additional cost or the lack of capacity to serve them?
Well, I don't know of a report. It might be out there, but the private school has to be able to offer what the child needs for the child to be accepted. So, and that's why if the need is not met, they come back to Middletown. Also, I do know the autism scholarship, a student that's somewhere on the spectrum can get up to $27,000 to attend a school that services autistic children. Also, the John Peterson can get anywhere between $7,600 and $27,000. The scholarships.
And just to give you a point of perspective, most of those kids on those scholarships are costing us $80,000 or more a year. We had 4 kids last year that were over $110,000 that we paid for them. We get some special ed aid to help support that, because it's, you know, based on their severity, how much we may get categorically. And then we also, the state has doubled from 10 million to 20 million catastrophic aid that we can apply for each kid that has a high dollar threshold. And so many districts are using that now. Usually we'll get 20% of what we've asked for, because once it hits 20 million, it's prorated. So, you know, if we spend an additional $50,000 on 10 kids, we may get back $10,000 for each of those 10 kids from the catastrophic aid. We're thankful for it, but yeah, there is a huge discrepancy in that, where private schools, again, they can pick and choose which scholarships they want to take. I don't think there's a discrimination test at all in that. So they see a high needs kid, they're not going to take them because they can't afford it and they don't offer those
They
services.
don't offer the
We think
And
services.
so within that debate of not offering those services, is there any expectation to increase their ability to offer services as this kind of doors open wider and more students are able to apply through these mediums, is there conversations or expectations for private schools to have behavior wards or autism wards or any type of accommodation for students to walk through their door just like any other student would, like in our school, that they would have the opportunity to walk in our building for a free, appropriate education in the same kinds of ways?
I'm sure those discussions are being held at some places. Ms. Scheibert, you can probably speak to that at John 23rd. Are you involved in discussions that are similar?
No, I am not. I work part-time, and I am kind of removed from the administrative part of that by choice. I think there, at John 23rd School, the personnel are in place that need to be the qualified personnel to take care of the children they need. There are children under the Autism Scholarship and the John Peterson Scholarship, and they have to follow the rules that are required by state law to, have this much time. If you have an aid, part of that has to be used as money for an aid, and sometimes the parents will choose to use part of that money for an aid to be there, and then they will pay the rest of the tuition cost. They'll supplement it themselves. I know there are a couple cases where once in a while children are not progressing through school the way they should because there's like the special education units are something that John 23rd for the like ED, if that's the proper terminology now. There isn't that because there isn't the money for that. There isn't the money to have the personnel for that. I'm like Todd in, I have my feet in two different places. My problem with the whole voucher system is in the state of Ohio, what I foresee is things are going to fall by the wayside. There's going to have to be an umbrella in which all these places that are receiving the state money are going to have to evaluate the same way, which in my mind is going to mean more supervisors are going to be hired to oversee more schools, and I think it's going to mushroom into something that the state legislatures have no idea what they're poking their heads in. To me, it's a frightening thing, and I don't think they're going to be able to evaluate properly all the schools that are participating. And I think that in itself upsets me. I've been involved with the John 23rd School people, so I think there is good education there. I can see that one. I don't see them all. And nobody sees them all.
No.
So I'm not sure the equity in all this is bothersome to me. I understand the anger over the discrepancy in the state funding. In, why does a student on a voucher get more money than the student who, is just coming to a public school? That I don't understand at all.
Yeah.
I have no idea, and I think that's wrong. I think that's terribly wrong.
I agree. 'Cause my angst is not with private schools at all. My angst is with the system that's in place that continues to create this hierarchy between public school system and choice.
And the
Because
equity.
And the equity.
The equity in evaluating the schools, evaluating the teachers, holding some people to this standard and some people to no standard. Although I will say that, like the special needs kids, I think they're pretty well protected, the ones that are accepted there. They're pretty well protected. But as far as
With the IEPs.
By law.
yeah, the IEP students. But this inequity in funding children, I don't understand the rationale behind that. I do not understand that.
Well, this evening's presentation really was to build a knowledge base, right? To what's going on, and to give you that information. And just let you know that this is what's going on right now.
Thank you. I wish that we could either have access to this PowerPoint
Oh,
or
I'll
a
send it to you.
printout of it or something, whatever.
Yeah,
I
I'll
would
send
love
it to you.
the tax thing too, because I got to tell you, that all doesn't register in my,
Well, this is what you sent out in the email.
I
You-
have
somebody
actually
sent it out. Thought
uploaded
it was
this
Debbie.
PowerPoint into
'Cause
Board
I
Docs.
looked at it
Oh,
earlier.
is it
yes,
in
I
there?
did.
Yeah, I
Okay,
put it in.
okay.
I was gonna say, I
Okay.
looked at it. Somebody sent it to me.
okay. But
Oh.
I need to study this more. Because I got to tell you, the millage and all that stuff,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
confusing and, you
it's
know,
a tough one.
We can know as early, like I said, as early as
But I
tomorrow.
told you, the whole thing about, when the very first slide shows uniformity, and I'm thinking, how is this all going to help uniformity of schools? I don't understand that.
It creates ununiformity. I think that's
Ununiformity.
what it was intended to
I think
say.
it's doing what it's intended to do in some regards.
It's intended to do, but it does not create a
It
level.
masks it in
Field.
some-
Just hit escape.
All right. Are we ready to move?
Yep.
We are ready to move to
let's roll.
tonight's consent agenda.
We actually made it a good work session.
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Todd.
Second.
Thanks, Anita. Any questions, comments? I did know that noticed that there was a field trip to the Cincinnati Zoo. I'm excited
Overnight.
that
Overnight.
our students are going there. I think I mentioned to somebody that I read or I saw on the news that, and this is to go sleep with the manatees, that I know they shipped off a bunch of manatees this past week back to Florida. And so I'm just crossing my fingers. There's still some manatees at the Cincinnati Zoo for our students to hang out
wonder-
with.
How are the students, the numbers, how are these students chosen to go on this?
So student leadership positions that
Okay.
Rosa Parks has,
Okay.
the
Okay.
student ambassadors, they
Okay.
use it as team building, leadership building.
Well,
Yeah.
they do a nice job.
They do, yes.
The Y swim team used to be called the Middletown Manatees.
I remember.
Yeah.
Not
Well,
the same
they're-
ones.
They stay around everywhere.
My niece Allison works at the overnight program at the
Oh,
Cincinnati
yay.
Zoo, so I'll see if my niece is working on January 11th through the 12th. And so,
It's a great experience for
I
our
bet they have a
children.
hard
Just
time
wanna know
getting
if a manatee
chaperones.
snores.
unless there are other comments or questions, are we ready to vote on the consent agenda?
Yes.
Mr. Bertram?
Mrs. Schreiber,
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart,
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan,
Yes.
Dr. Urso.
Yes.
Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Under Human Resources, there's a Personnel Agenda B. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second, please.
Second.
Thank you. And again, I believe this is, my brother is
May
embedded
I
in there
ask a
somewhere.
question, though? The mentors, is
Yeah.
this the one that had the mentors under it? Were those all students from Highview? Or teachers from Highview? Or what is this mentorship position?
They're the res ed mentors. So
Okay.
all of our new 1 to 4 year teachers, they have res ed mentors.
Okay.
So that's who you see on there.
That's the
Yeah.
mentorship. Okay, got it.
All right, other questions? Mr. Bertram?
Mrs. Stewart,
Yes.
Mrs. Mulligan,
Yes.
Dr. Urso,
Abstain?
Mr. Moore,
Yes.
and Mrs. Schreiber.
Yes.
Under business, and I have a question to Mr. Bertram. I see under this first action item a lot of whereases, and it always brings my radar to the first meeting of our year where I'm typically to read those whereases, and that's a lot of them. Is there an expectation to read this contract this evening?
You could just go ahead and read the motion item.
Okay, all right. And so there's an action item for a resolution authorizing the advertisement and subsequent review of architectural services. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved?
Second.
In a second. The recommended action, it is recommended by Mr. Eric Stotzing and Ms. Deborah Hauser to approve the resolution authorizing the advertisement and subsequent review and evaluation process pursuant to RC 15366 in connection with the request for qualifications for criteria architect services for the design and construction of a bus transportation and maintenance facility. Anything else I need to read, Mr. Bertram?
That's a good summary.
That's a good summary.
Yes.
Are there questions, comments, commentary regarding this, explanation needed?
I'm glad this construction is going much quicker and more efficient than the community center project.
Echo that. There are no questions, comments, concerns.
The funding's all lined up for the project, is it not?
Yeah,
So-
there's actually no cost to what
This
we're
one.
doing here today, and it's just getting the ball in motion to hire an architect to start looking at what it's going to take to get the RFP ready to send out.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, and
this is
we are
RFP,
on time, right, on schedule.
Good.
Yeah.
Under budget.
You have to have an architect firm create the criteria and a second architect firm draw the drawings. So that's what we have. This is just following the law. Yeah, good.
All right. I think, Mr. Bertram, we're ready to vote.
Mrs. Mulligan?
Yes.
Dr. Urso?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Schreiber?
Yes.
And Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Under curriculum and instruction, there is a first read. It's a contract with, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Signation? Is that correct?
That's
Right.
good.
And so, and I'll allow our superintendent to discuss this, but I believe this is for some web-based virtual tutoring at our sixth grade center. And wanted before an action for us as a board to have an ability to understand better what this service is, the costs associated, the qualifications of said tutors, and any other questions we might have. So, Ms. House,
So make sure I hit all that.
I will.
So, okay, so Ms. Mulligan, do you recall probably about a month ago you had said, you had asked
Yeah,
the
I
district
remember. I remember.
about high dosage tutoring?
right.
This is that.
Okay,
Okay?
good. That's a good thing.
So the state of Ohio has allocated dollars for school districts to receive high dosage tutoring for free. Okay, so it's free of charge to the district. You had to apply for the dollars, and Highview was awarded a contract with Signition. Now, Signition also is a vendor that's gone through all of the vetting process from the state of Ohio. There are 6 different vendors that Ohio's approved for the high dosage tutoring. And this is high dosage tutoring for reading, for our students that just have not quite met the mark when it comes to reading. The way this works is we have 48 seats for reading. It is virtual. It's virtual in nature, but there is a live human at the other end of the virtual screen. So there's small group tutoring. It's 4 to 1. Each tutor is highly qualified, so it's a teacher at the end doing the tutoring. Groups of 4, if I didn't already say that, 4 to 1. One of the pieces in this contract is that if we have no-shows for the tutoring, that the district will be charged. But what's important there is so if you have 4 in a group, it would be no-show of all 4. So the likelihood of all 4 students no-showing, also you can, if you give them a 3-hour window of time, just in case you have 4 that don't show up, there's no charge at all. If we would have that case, we do have some dollars allocated that would cover that. But the likelihood of 4 children not attending one of the tutoring sessions is pretty slim. This is, we vow for 3 days a week at 30 minutes apiece for the 48 students and the 48 seats. And we also are planning on using this as a pilot to see how the virtual tutoring actually pans out for us with the high dosage tutoring. In the works in the state of Ohio, right now in kindergarten through 3rd grade, we're required to have RIMPs, reading improvement plans, correct? With the 3rd grade reading guarantee. Well, right now, the state of Ohio, with all this dyslexia legislation, they're looking at that extending to grade 12, kindergarten through 12. So really piloting this high dosage tutoring through the state of Ohio will give us a glimpse into what this could possibly look like if it goes K-12. So really, it's a pilot, 48 seats.
Does it happen inside the school day?
It happens inside the school day. The research has found that it's best if it happens inside the school day. Also, if it happens inside the school day, they're going to be there, right? If it's outside the school day, the chances of them showing up for after-school tutoring at home.
Do the teachers
Okay.
recommend it, or do the parents have to know about it? Do the teachers recommend the child, or how do the students?
The building
and parents
leadership
find
team
out?
is identifying the 48 students. They're focusing in on those students that are right there at the cusp that are close to making the mark when it comes to the reading. So that's their target population at this point in time, to really see how this is going to pan out in our school.
What kind of techniques do they use? Do they coordinate in any way with things that are already being used in Middletown schools, or how are they going to present their information?
Signition uses their own assessments to determine where students fall and what the gaps are. So their tutoring program is designed to meet those gaps. And the students are also placed in their small group based upon the Signition assessment scores.
So the teachers really don't have to have anything to do with
The te-
setting the kids up, or?
The teachers have to recommend
Okay.
and monitor.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And it's
About-
just the sixth grade center.
Sixth grade, correct.
Let me run through each of my questions.
Go
one
ahead
big
to make
spin.
sure I hit them all.
Yeah, you did. You did a nice
Okay.
job covering them. You said highly qualified, and so I'm assuming they all have at least a bachelor's degree in education.
They have a teaching license, yes.
Teaching license.
Yes.
All
No,
right.
no 2-year degrees here, yeah.
Good.
Or no,
And-
yeah, that's right, 2, yeah.
Yeah, or high school degrees.
High school.
Or
High
high
school
school, yeah, it's like,
diplomas.
it's not even 2 years,
No,
high
it's
school
a high school
degrees.
diploma.
No, teachers,
And it says under the funding source, general funds. Is that general funds if a student is missing from a session, that's when it would come out of general fund? The rest is covered through
the,
the grant that you spoke of?
the state of Ohio covers it.
Okay.
And 4 students have to be absent.
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah, for the session not to go.
Yeah.
And so is it the belief or the assumption that at the sixth grade center, we have multiple students reading below grade level? And so we're using Signition's assessment, not like the MAP or any other tool to be able to identify these students?
Well, we'll use MAP to identify, MAP and last year's OST scores to identify the 48.
Okay.
So then Signition will take it from there, right?
And this will go from right now to the end of the academic year?
Correct.
And so will students like jump onto the, I guess, process conveyor belt and then hopefully be replaced by other students, or will this be the cohort of 48 students will remain constant from beginning to end?
Beginning to end, they'll be constant.
All right, that covers it.
One of the things that impressed me when I read about it is that the mentors are in touch with the teachers on a regular basis, because they're in the building
Yep.
and the teachers are there.
Right, just that conversation.
Yeah.
I realize that we're going to a more virtual world. It's begrudging because I do think face-to-face, in-person contact is, I mean,
Right.
it's way
The human
better.
touch.
But I understand there's a, I guess, necessity bears these kinds of things too. So.
I'm waiting for the
The what?
math improvement.
Math. Other questions, comments? All right, so I believe we'll see this in a couple weeks.
Yes.
All right, committee reports. Any committees to do any reporting?
No, but we've got 2 meetings coming
Coming
up.
up.
Yes, Ms. Hauser,
No,
anything
no,
to bring to the?
Nope, ours is coming up.
Policy and district
This-
leadership team will
right.
be coming soon.
One this week and one next.
Butler Tech, anything on the forefront with Butler Tech?
Just the aviation project is in high gear, so hopefully I believe it's moving along smoothly.
Is that over at our airport here?
At the airport,
Yeah.
14 million.
And that, unless there's other things within that,
Yeah.
that brings us to Board of Education reports and activity. And Mr. Moore, batting leadoff tonight.
No comments this evening.
No comments. Ms. Scheibert?
Well, we had a wonderful time at the homecoming parade. We did. It was fun. It
was
really
fun.
was fun.
It was.
Yeah, we had Mrs. Mulligan in that car, and I
was the
drove that.
queen. I was the queen.
You
You
were
were
the
the
queen.
queen. You were the
I got to ride in the car.
queen that night. But it was fun.
Good.
It was a beautiful night for those kids. It really was wonderful. So I'm glad we all participated in that.
Yep. Ms. Stewart?
Thank you, Chris, for acknowledging and thanking all of the principals, and I hope we
I didn't get all of them
continue.
yet, and so I'm leaning on my friends here to make sure we work.
Well, I was
through
going to say,
it.
we're
There's a
going to
principal out there that
continue
didn't get
to,
thanked yet. I
we
don't
got
wanna-
all month, but
Yeah.
appreciate the principals and Superintendent Hauser, I loved your video. That was
Oh,
very well done and very
Thank you.
informative,
Very
and
good
very
job.
nice. And I loved hearing about the donors who have contributed to the district, and that was very nice. I appreciated that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Mulligan?
Well, I'm kind of in a quandary about the voucher and all that. It's not nearly as scary when you realize that those, how many kids? 558? That's something like
10%?
40 kids per grade.
And that was last year's data.
Yeah.
So it could be
Okay,
higher.
well, it'll change this year. And, you know, the world, society, the public, the voters, they get a benefit from it in that these schools generally graduate 100% of their students. And so there's that many more people in the labor force and prepared for work. I would not think that, I would not want the non-public schools to think that they aren't valued because they are. And I haven't figured a percent, but a good percentage of the cost of educating them comes from private people who have other things they could spend their money on, but they choose to spend it on this, and we should be grateful for them because they're getting their kids educated. So it's a very difficult thing. If we had all the money in the world, it wouldn't be a problem, but that's not the case. And that besides the MIMP, that's my only concern.
I guess my turn. I was glad to see on Facebook, Twitter, etc., all the nice pictures from homecoming, dressed up and going out. I coach a little fall baseball team, and a couple of the players said they went out and had filet mignon, and so they were so excited about that. And so I was glad everybody made it home safe. I'm not a huge fan of parades, but I enjoyed walking down. I always joke with my kids that I'm kind of anti-parade. I'm kind of the grumpy guy with the parades.
Well,
But that was a fun one.
You brought your wife, and she made
I
it
brought my
fun.
wife. She kind of walked down the road with me, so it was fun to kind of cruise next to the Prius.
She was fun to talk to,
Yeah, and
since
you-
you wouldn't talk to me, so.
Yeah, I couldn't get too close. You could have veered off and knocked me with your Prius. I want to congratulate the seniors. On Friday, our band seniors, our cheerleading seniors, our football seniors will be recognized at the game. A lot goes into each of those events, and our soccer seniors, our volleyball seniors, it's moving. Winter sports are almost on us. Fall sports are coming to the end. I wish them all luck as they go into tournament season. And so with that, I want to say thanks to my colleagues Verlena and Anita over at our community center. It was fun sitting on stage with you, answering questions, the three of us, and hopefully having an opportunity to communicate with voters about our desires and hopes and questions and so forth. So always proud to sit next to the two of you. You make me look good, and so thanks for that.
Yeah, I was going to, say thank the Teachers Association and the Chamber of Commerce and the NAACP for the opportunity to have a forum and audience and talk. That was very appreciated.
Speaking of fall sports, a lot of great things happening out there with a lot of our young athletes. I'm excited to see them in tournaments and so forth coming up here at the end of the year. I know we still have our cross-country kids that are setting new personal bests, doing a great job out there. And I'd like to talk about a former alum, my favorite baseball player, Kyle Schwarber. He is in the playoffs with the Phillies. Personal best, 47 home runs for the regular season, 104 RBIs. So it's exciting seeing him do well. I'll say it again, he was a tribe killer. My favorite team, Cleveland. But, I'm glad he's doing well, and I hope he does well in the playoffs.
Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Mr.
Very
Bertrand.
good. Okay, Adopt-A Class continues to grow. We almost have Creekview taken care of in grades 3 through 5, which means we're now in Wildwood, Mayfield, Amanda, Creekview, and we're moving on to Miller next. And Miller's all ready to accept our business partners. So it's just we're gonna have all elementaries covered by the end of the school year, which that is a big celebration.
That's an amazing group, isn't it?
It's an amazing group. Yes. All you have to do is say yes, and they take it from there.
best kind of group.
That's the best kind of
That's
group.
the easiest kind.
Yeah,
All right, I sense that we're at the end.
we are.
All right, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, you guys jumping at that. Mr. Bertram?
All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Have a good night.
8 o'clock has